Some men go their whole lives never knowing what it feels like to be invisible inside a room they paid for. I'm not one of those men anymore. My name is David Morgan. I'm 53 years old. I spent 31 of those years building something, a business, a home, a family. I coached Little League on Saturday mornings and fixed the fence on Sunday afternoons, and never once asked anyone to thank me for it. That's not how I was raised. You work, you provide, you show up. That's the contract. Nobody told me the contract had a cancellation clause. Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, every villain in these stories thought they were the smartest person in the room. They were not. Subscribe so you never miss a story. It started the way most catastrophic things do, quietly and with good intentions. My son Caleb was 28 when he brought Lily home for the first time. Elizabeth and I were sitting on the back porch when he pulled into the driveway, and I remember watching her step out of the car and thinking, well, she's confident. That's the most honest thing I can say. She had the kind of posture that walks into a room expecting applause. She shook my hand like she was doing me a favor. Lily Chen, she said, I've heard so much about you. She hadn't asked my name. She already knew it. She already knew everything she needed to know about David Morgan before she ever set foot in my house. I didn't understand that then. Good things, I hope, I said, because that's the thing you say. She smiled. Of course, I didn't know it yet, but that smile was the most expensive thing I'd ever see. Caleb had always been a good kid. Not perfect. He could be stubborn, occasionally oblivious, the kind of man who needs someone to read the room for him because he's still marveling at the ceiling. But he had a good heart. He worked hard. He called his mother every Sunday without being reminded. When he told us he was in love, I believed him. When he said Lily was the one, I didn't doubt him for a second. What I doubted, and I kept this to myself because Elizabeth told me I was being paranoid, was the way Lily looked at everything in our house like she was appraising it. The first time she came to dinner, she complimented the kitchen and then said, "Did you renovate recently, or is it just dated?" Elizabeth laughed and said it was original. Lily nodded slowly the way you nod when someone says something you expected. I poured myself a second glass of wine. The engagement happened fast. 8 months after they started dating, Caleb called to tell us. Elizabeth cried. I told him congratulations and meant it. He was happy. And a father's job is to support that. So I did. The wedding planning started almost immediately, and within the first 2 weeks, I had my first real preview of what this was going to cost me. Not in money. Not yet. In dignity. Elizabeth and I sat down with Caleb and Lily at their apartment. We brought a bottle of wine and an open heart. Lily had a binder, an actual binder color-coded with tabbed sections, like she'd been planning this event since before Caleb had even asked. We're thinking the Thornwood estate, she said, sliding a brochure across the table. I picked it up, looked at the photos, looked at the price list on the back page, set it down. That's a beautiful venue, I said. It is, she agreed. We'd need the full weekend package, obviously. Obviously. How many guests are you thinking? Elizabeth asked. Around 280, Lily said. I took a sip of wine. 280 people, give or take. Some of my mother's friends from her church, a few of my dad's colleagues. How many people do we know? I asked, looking at Caleb. He shifted in his seat. I mean, we've got family, some guys from work, the guys from college. So roughly 60 of those 280 are our people, I said. Lily looked at me with that smile again. Weddings are really about the couple, Mr. Morgan, not the guest list. I wanted to say a lot of things, I said. Of course. Here's what nobody tells you about paying for a wedding. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in increments, like a slow leak, the venue deposit, the catering quote, the florist consultation that somehow becomes a $5,000 commitment, the photographer who is the only one worth using, according to Lily's friend Stephanie, who has opinions about everything and expertise in nothing. Each time a number landed on the table, Lily looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at me. I looked at Elizabeth. Elizabeth touched my arm in that way she has, gentle but firm. That means David, please. And David did. By the time we were 3 months into planning, I'd written checks totaling $41,000. The final tally, by wedding day, would land at $58,240. I know that number the way I know my own social security number. I will know it until the day I die. What nobody tells you about paying for someone else's dream is that gratitude has an expiration date. With Lily, I think the expiration date was somewhere around the second week of planning, when she figured out that I was going to pay, regardless of how she treated me. She was right, but she was wrong about what that meant long term. I didn't know it yet. The 6 months between the engagement and the wedding were an education. I learned that Lily referred to my suggestions as sweet, in the same tone someone uses to describe a child's finger painting. I learned that when Elizabeth made a comment about the centerpieces, Lily would nod patiently and then do exactly what she'd already planned. I learned that Caleb, God love him, had been slowly, steadily trained to defer to his fiancée on all things wedding-related, and on quite a few things outside of that category as well. I also learned about Madison. Madison was Lily's younger sister. She was the maid of honor, and she operated as Lily's advance team. She'd show up to planning meetings 15 minutes early, brief everyone on Lily's vision, and gently redirect anyone who strayed from it. She was 25 years old and had the diplomatic efficiency of a UN peacekeeping officer. I respected it, even when it was aimed directly at me. "Mr. Morgan," Madison said to me at a cake tasting in March, "Lily just wants to make sure everyone feels included in the process." "That's kind of her," I said, eating a cube of vanilla cardamom cake that cost more than my first car. "She really values your input." "I know," Madison smiled. "It just might not always look exactly like what you suggested." "Madison," I said, "I've been married for 30 years. I know exactly what that looks like." She laughed. Genuinely, I think. We understood each other after that. The week before the wedding, Brooks arrived. Brooks was Lily's father. I'd met him twice before. Once at the engagement party, once at a dinner that Lily had engineered with the precision of a diplomatic summit. Brooks Turner was a tall man with a firm handshake and the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades being the most important person in every room. He was a retired corporate attorney. He wore a watch that probably cost more than my truck. What I noticed immediately was that Brooks didn't offer to contribute anything to the wedding. Not a word, not a gesture, not an envelope. He flew in from Phoenix, checked into the hotel on my tab, because the room block was part of the venue package, which I was paying for, and proceeded to conduct himself as the father of the bride in the fullest ceremonial sense, without any of the financial implications. I mentioned this to Elizabeth on Thursday night, the eve of the rehearsal dinner. "David," she responded, "I'm not angry. I'm just making an observation." "You sound angry. I'm $41,000 past angry." I've circled back to curious. She kissed me on the cheek. "2 more days." I nodded. 2 more days. The rehearsal dinner was at a restaurant downtown. I paid for it. Caleb gave a speech that made Elizabeth cry. Brooks gave a speech about Lily that was eloquent and warm, and made no mention of anyone in my family. Madison gave a toast that was genuinely funny. Even I laughed. Lily caught my eye from across the table when Madison sat down. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Morgan," she said. Really. And I believed her. That's the thing. In that moment, I actually believed her. The wedding day was beautiful. I want to say that and mean it, because it's true. The Thornwood estate was stunning in late September light. The flowers were extraordinary, cascading white roses and deep burgundy dahlias that Elizabeth had fought quietly for over a 7-hour planning session back in July. The food was exceptional. The string quartet during cocktail hour played Chet Baker, which I'd requested, and nobody told me they'd ignored the request. I walked Caleb to the altar. He was nervous and handsome, and he looked at me just before we reached the officiant and said, "Dad, I need you to know." "I know," I said. He nodded. We both nodded. I didn't cry at the ceremony. Elizabeth cried enough for both of us. I stood at the front with Brooks and watched my son marry a woman I had complex feelings about, and I thought, whatever happens next, I gave him this. That's mine. Nobody can take that. Then cocktail hour ended, and the reception began, and someone came and took it from me. I need you to understand the geography of what happened. The reception hall had 2 primary seating areas. The first was the main floor, round tables with the floral centerpieces. The dance floor in the center, the head table up front where the wedding party sat. The second was a raised platform to the left, slightly elevated, with better sightlines to the stage and what I later learned Lily had described to the venue coordinator as the premium seating area. Elizabeth and I were escorted to the main floor. Table 7. I didn't think anything of it initially. I assumed it was proximity to something, the bar, the dance floor, whatever. I sat down. I looked at the place cards. I looked at the other names at table 7, Turner, Brooks, Turner, Stephanie, Chen, Robert, Chen, Angela. I looked around the table. Lily's parents, Lily's aunt and uncle. I looked up at the raised platform. There was a table up there with a centerpiece twice the size of ours. Elizabeth, I said quietly. I see it, she said. Who's up there? She looked at the seating chart near the entrance. She came back with a face I hadn't seen since the time Caleb totaled my truck at 16. David, who's up there? Lily's college friends. Her sorority sisters. Her sorority sisters are in the premium seats. David, and we're at table 7. Let's just. I stood up. I was perfectly calm. I want to make that clear. My voice was level. My hands were still. My heart rate was probably 60. I have done difficult things in my life. I built a business from a truck and a tool belt. I have composure. I walked to the wedding coordinator, a pleasant woman named Turner, no relation, who had a headset and a clipboard, and I said, "Excuse me, I'm the groom's father. Can you help me find our assigned table? I think there may have been a mix-up." She looked at her clipboard. David Morgan, yes. Table 7, sir. Right this way, I came from table 7. I'm asking if there's been a mix-up. She glanced at her clipboard again, then at me, then at the clipboard. No, sir. Table 7 is correct. Is there anything else I can help you with? I looked at the raised platform. I looked at table 7. No, I said. Thank you. I went back to my seat. Elizabeth put her hand on mine. It's fine, I said. It was not fine. The moment that ended, everything happened 40 minutes later. I don't know what I was expecting. An acknowledgement, maybe. A toast that recognized what Elizabeth and I had given. A gesture. Some evidence that the last 6 months and $58,000 had registered somewhere in Lily's consciousness as significant. What I got was Lily. She materialized at my elbow during the salad course, radiant in her dress, just married, holding a glass of champagne. She leaned down and said it quietly, not mean, not sneering, almost conversational, like she was telling me the soup of the day. David, I hope you're comfortable. I wanted to let you know, tonight the wedding party seating is reserved. If you could just enjoy the evening from here, that would be wonderful. You're here as a guest. I looked at her. You're here as a guest, she said again, smaller this time, like a reminder. I didn't say anything. She straightened up, smiled that smile, and walked back to the head table. I sat very still for approximately 15 seconds. Then I picked up my fork and ate my salad. Elizabeth was watching me. David, eat your salad, I said. David, what did she... She told me I'm a guest, I said, so I'm going to sit here and be a very good one. Elizabeth set her fork down. I'm fine, I said, but something had just clicked off inside me. Quietly. The way a furnace shuts down. No drama, no explosion. Just a switch. And a silence where the heat used to be. I watched Caleb for the rest of the evening. I want to be fair to my son. He didn't look comfortable. He danced with his bride and laughed with his groomsmen and clinked glasses with Brooks and his college friends. But twice, I caught him looking across the room at me with something in his eyes that I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe. Or the particular helplessness of a man who knows something is wrong, but has decided it's too late to fix it. I didn't go to him. He didn't come to me. At 9 o'clock, I told Elizabeth I was going to get some air. I walked outside to the Thornwood Terrace. It overlooked a garden, lit softly from below, white roses and burgundy dahlias everywhere. $58,000 worth of beautiful. Brooks Turner found me out there 10 minutes later. Hell of a night, he said. Beautiful venue, I said. He nodded. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two fathers at a wedding, and then he said Lily can be a lot. I looked at him. She always has been, he said with a sort of weary pride. Gets what she wants. Her mother calls it determination. What do you call it? He smiled into his whiskey. Expensive, I laughed. I didn't mean to. He laughed too. I should have contributed more, he said, to the wedding. Yeah, I said. You should have. He looked at me sideways. Then he nodded slowly and went back inside. That night, lying in the hotel room Elizabeth and I had paid for, I made a decision. Not an angry decision. Not an impulsive one. I want to be clear about this because what came next has been described by some people, Lily's people, as a reaction, a tantrum, an old man's wounded pride. It wasn't. It was arithmetic. I had given Lily the wedding of her dreams. She had looked me in the eye and told me I was a guest in a room I had bought. I did not make a scene. I did not embarrass my son. I sat at table 7 and ate my salad and smiled when the photographer pointed a camera in my direction. But I am a man who builds things. And a man who builds things knows that what you build, you can also stop building. I picked up my phone and I made one note to myself. 2 words. That was my reply when the time came. The time came 31 days later. Caleb and Lily had gone on their honeymoon, a trip to Tuscany, 14 days which they had budgeted and planned and paid for themselves to their credit. I respected that. They'd been back for 3 days when Lily called. Not Caleb. Lily. Elizabeth was in the kitchen when the call came. I took it in my office, in the chair behind the desk where I'd signed every check for the last 6 months. David, she sounded warm, buoyant, freshly tanned from Italy. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, I said. I just wanted to reach out because Caleb and I have been talking. We're so grateful for everything you and Elizabeth did for the wedding. It really was the most magical day. It was a beautiful event, I said. It really was. A small pause. So we've been going over our finances since we got back. And you know how it is. Weddings are so expensive. They are, I said. And we'd talked about maybe, down the line, taking a second trip, like a delayed honeymoon, to Japan, which has always been a dream of mine. Of yours, I repeated. Of ours, she corrected smoothly. And we were wondering, since you were so incredibly generous with the wedding, whether you might be able to help with something like that. Just a contribution. Whatever feels right. I let the silence sit. David, I heard you, I said. Is this a bad time? No, I said. This is a perfect time, actually. I've been thinking about this conversation. Oh. Her voice had a new quality, alert, like an animal that has heard a sound it can't identify. Lily, I said, do you remember what you said to me at the reception? Silence. At table 7, I said. You leaned over and you said, and I want to make sure I have this right. You're here as a guest. More silence. I've been thinking about that, I said. Because you were right, I was a guest. And guests don't fund honeymoons. I paused. So my answer is no. David, that's it. That's all I have. One word. No. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Lily. My voice was very quiet. There is no misunderstanding. You were perfectly clear at the wedding. I was a guest. So I'm going to act like one. Guests give toaster ovens and gift cards. They don't write checks for vacations. The line was silent for a long time. I'm going to tell Caleb. Please do, I said. He can call me. I'd love to talk to my son. I hung up. I sat in my chair. My hands were completely still. My heart rate was probably 60. I felt like a man who had just finished a very long job. Caleb called that evening. I want to tell you that conversation was easy. It wasn't. He was hurt and confused, and he said things, not cruel things, but things that stung because they came from him, not from Lily. He said I was being petty. He said I was punishing his wife for a seating arrangement. He said Elizabeth was upset. I let him talk. When he was done, I said, Caleb, I love you. I paid for your wedding because I love you, not because I expected anything. But I will not be told I'm a guest in a room I paid for and then be asked to fund the next trip. That's not how it works. Not for me. She didn't mean it like that. She said it twice. I said, quietly so only I could hear. That's not an accident. He was quiet for a long time. I need you to understand, I said, that I'm not cutting you off. I'm cutting off the open wallet. Those are 2 very different things. You want to come over for dinner Sunday? I'll grill. Elizabeth will make that corn salad you like. But I'm not a bank account with a dad attached to it. He hung up without saying yes or no. He showed up Sunday. Without Lily. We grilled. Elizabeth made the corn salad. We didn't talk about the wedding. We watched football and argued about the offensive line, and I had 2 beers and fell asleep in the recliner before the 4th quarter. It was the best afternoon I'd had in a year. Now here's where I tell you what happened in the weeks after. Lily did not take the no gracefully. She called Elizabeth twice, with a version of events in which I had always been difficult and controlling, and had used the wedding money as a power play. Elizabeth listened politely both times. Then she came to me and said, she's trying to rewrite history. I know, I said. Caleb is in the middle. I know that too. What do you want to do? I thought about it. Nothing, I said. I don't have to do anything. The truth doesn't need my help. Elizabeth looked at me for a long moment. You've been very calm about all of this. I've been calm since table 7, I said. That worries me a little. I smiled. It shouldn't. What I hadn't mentioned to anyone, not Elizabeth, not Caleb, not Brooks Turner on that terrace, was what I had done the morning after the wedding, while Elizabeth was still asleep and I was sitting in the hotel room with my coffee. I had called my accountant, a sharp woman named Stephanie who has handled my business finances for 11 years and has never once made a mistake plan. I told her I wanted a review of every asset, every account, every instrument that currently listed beneficiaries. Stephanie didn't ask why. That's why I've kept her for 11 years. The review took 3 weeks. The restructuring took 2 more. By the time Lily called asking for honeymoon money, everything was already done. The business, my contracting company, the thing I built from a truck and a tool belt, had been transferred into a trust. A very specific trust with very specific terms, drawn up by my attorney. The terms were simple. The trust benefited Elizabeth Morgan, and upon her passing, Caleb Morgan, under the condition that he was not, at the time of distribution, in a marriage that had been legally determined to have resulted from financial coercion or undue influence. That last clause was my attorney's idea. I thought it was aggressive. He said, "David, you're not wrong to protect what you built." I signed it. There was one more piece. The property, our home, the house I'd renovated myself over 20 years, the house with the kitchen Lily had called dated, was now held in Elizabeth's name alone, not jointly. Hers, I hadn't done this out of hatred. I want to be honest about that. I'd done it because a man who builds things also knows how to protect them. I had watched 6 months of planning, and Lily's particular kind of careful strategic warmth, and I had recognized something. She was a long game player. The wedding was an audition. The honeymoon ask was the first real move. I didn't know what the next move would be, but I would be ready for it. The next move came 4 months later, and it wasn't what I expected. Lily filed paperwork with her attorney requesting a formal accounting of the wedding expenditures. I'm still not entirely sure what she was trying to accomplish. Her attorney sent a letter suggesting that certain wedding expenses may have created a financial obligation that entitled the couple to additional family support going forward. I read that letter 3 times. Then I called my attorney. He called their attorney. Their attorney received in response a very polite and very thorough package. Copies of every check I had written, every invoice I had paid, every contract I had signed. All of it in my name, for a wedding that Lily had designated me to attend as a guest. The letter also included a single line at the bottom, which my attorney wrote, and which I approved. Mr. Morgan notes that as a guest of the event in question, he has no outstanding financial obligations to the couple, and considers this matter closed. I don't know if Lily showed that to Caleb. I know that Caleb called me 2 days later. His voice was different, quieter, a register I recognized from when he was 12 years old and had broken something and was trying to figure out how to tell me. "Dad," he said. "Hey, bud." A long pause. "I didn't know she sent that letter. I figured," I said. "I'm sorry." 2 words. I let them sit. "You don't have to apologize for someone else," I said, "but I appreciate it. She's..." He stopped, started again. "She's not who I thought she was. I'm starting to think that. I didn't say I told you so. I am proud of that. It took everything I had, but I didn't say it. I'm here," I said. "Whenever you need me." "For whatever you need." We talked for an hour. About the business, about football, about nothing. The same way we used to. When he hung up, Elizabeth was in the doorway. "He's waking up," she said. "He always was." I'll tell you how it ended, because it ended the way quiet, careful things tend to end. Not with an explosion, but with a door closing. 7 months after the wedding, Caleb came to Sunday dinner alone again. He'd been coming alone more often. We didn't ask. He didn't explain. That Sunday, halfway through Elizabeth's dinner spread, he said, "I think I made a mistake." I put my fork down. "I think I married someone who saw me differently than I saw her," he said. He said it plainly, the way you say things once you're done being ashamed of them. "And I think I let some things happen that I shouldn't have." "Caleb," Elizabeth started. "I should have said something at the wedding," he said, looking at me. "About the seating, I knew it was wrong. I didn't say anything. The room was quiet." "Why didn't you?" I asked, not angry, genuinely asking. He looked at his plate. "Because I thought it would pass. I thought she'd come around. I thought if I just kept the peace long enough." "Long enough for what?" He didn't have an answer. I picked up my fork. "You know what I've learned about keeping the peace?" I said. "It's not peace. It's just quiet. And quiet isn't the same thing." He filed for separation 11 days later. I'm not going to pretend I was sad about it. I know how that sounds. He's my son, and his pain is real, and I sat with him through every hard night of those first months. The legal meetings, the dividing of the apartment, the first holidays alone. I did all of that. I showed up. But I am not going to pretend I mourned Lily's exit from our lives. What I will tell you is this. The week the separation was finalized, Brooks Turner called me. I hadn't spoken to him since the wedding terrace. He said, "I heard." "Yeah," I said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "Your daughter made her choices. My son's making his." He paused. "She told me you refused to help with the honeymoon. That's accurate. She said you were cruel about it." "Brooks," I said. I said one word. "No. That's it. If that's cruel, I think we have different definitions." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She always did have her mother's version of events." "I'll bet." Another pause. "For what it's worth, David, I should have written a check." "Yeah," I said. "You should have." We both laughed. "Same as the terrace." "Take care of that boy," he said. "Always have," I said. It's been 14 months since the wedding. Caleb has a small apartment and a good lawyer and a clearer head than I've seen in 2 years. He came over last Saturday and helped me re-roof the garage, something we've been meaning to do for 3 summers. We worked from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Elizabeth brought us sandwiches at noon. The dog kept trying to climb the ladder. At 4 o'clock when we were packing up the tools, Caleb said, "Thanks for not saying I told you so." "I thought about it," I said. "I know. Approximately 400 times." He smiled. First real smile I'd seen in months. I should have listened. "Yeah," I said. "But you got here." He nodded. I handed him a beer and we sat on the tailgate of my truck and watched the sun go down over the yard that belongs to Elizabeth now, officially, legally, irrevocably. The yard with the fence I fixed every Sunday for 20 years. The home that no one is taking from us. I thought about table 7. I thought about Lily's voice saying, "You're here as a guest," like it was nothing. I thought about the check with all those zeros that bought her the most beautiful day of her life and earned me a folding chair in the back of the room she couldn't have afforded without me. I thought about 2 words. No. That was the first set. Here are the last ones. The ones I've been sitting with for 14 months. The ones that cost me nothing and gave me everything back. My house, my rules, my son, my call. Some men go their whole lives never knowing what it feels like to be invisible inside a room they paid for. I'm not one of those men anymore, and Lily Chen Morgan, currently Lily Chen in the process of reverting, is not getting a single dollar more from David Morgan. Not now, not ever. She wanted a guest. She got one. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.